Hello, I'm Ivana Spinet.
And I'm Kate Seltzer.
We're both members of the CUNY-NYSIEB support team.
And we are going to be walking you through Translanguaging, a CUNY-NYSIEB guide for educators. Welcome to the CUNY-NYSIEB online series, Presentations for Educators of Emergent Bilinguals. In this session, we will be introducing the Translanguaging guide, walking through the table of contents, and pointing out the different components of each of our 29 strategy pages. The first thing we want you to do is download the Translanguaging guide. If you haven't done that yet, you can go to our CUNY-NYSIEB website, www.cuny-nysieb.org, and look at the tab that says Publications. And after you click on the tab that says Publications, you will find the Translanguaging guide for educators, which you can download as a PDF. So if you open to the table of contents, you will see that the Translanguaging guide is separated into 3 parts. The first part is called the Translanguaging classroom, and this sets the stage and context for all translanguaging work that is going to occur. And it's separated into 4 different strategies: multilingual ecology, instructional foundations, collaborative work, and translanguaging resources. The second part is called Content and Literacy Instruction, and this section as a whole demonstrates how translanguaging can be used for learning academic content and developing literacy practices. And this part 2 is separated into 2 subsections: Content Area and Writing Instruction, and Content Area and Reading Instruction. The third part of the guide is for language development, and this section demonstrates how translanguaging can assist with language development as a whole. And the strategies within this part are in 2 different sections: vocabulary and syntax. So moving on from the table of contents, we are going to look really carefully at a strategy page from the guide. So if you're following along, you can open your guide to page 62, which is a strategy page called Multilingual Collaborative Work Content Areas. Now we're going to move into looking specifically at one strategy page from the guide and really outline the different components of each strategy page. So if you open up your guide to page 62, we're going to be looking at the strategy called Multilingual Collaborative Work Content Areas. As I go through this, I want you to look and make sure you're following along where we have red outlines, because that is the specific section we're going to be talking about. The very first piece you'll see is at the top of the Translanguaging strategy page, and it has 3 boxes: elementary, middle, and secondary. And there are 3 different colors: elementary blue, middle green, secondary purple. And these boxes mean that the strategy can be applied to those grade level strands. Most strategies have all 3 levels, but several of the strategy pages only have an elementary focus or a middle and secondary focus. So that's an important piece to pay attention to when you're looking at strategies. In the column over to the left, you will see that each strategy page has a number of essential questions. These are questions that can guide and help you frame your thinking as you read each strategy page. Also on the left-hand side in the column, you'll see that each strategy is aligned to a number of Common Core State standards. In red and underlined is the strand, that's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And the broad categories within the strand. So we have key ideas and details under the reading strand, for example, in this strategy. And the specific anchor strategy is also denoted by its number. In italics, we provide further explanation of the standard and how it connects to the strategy in particular. Looking now at the sort of important content of the strategy, we have the very first section, which just simply asks, what is it? This section gives an overview of the strategy by explaining several things. First, what is this strategy, what it helps students to do and understand, in what context it's used, and what research supports the use of the strategy. Wherever possible, we really try to make connections between research and practice for each of these strategies. This section also outlines how you can add the strategy to your teaching, so it's a very practical section of the strategy page. The second large piece of the strategy page is called the Translanguaging How-To, and this section explains the step-by-step process of putting this strategy into practice. It includes questions to consider, templates and examples of the strategy, and resources that you'll need to actually put this strategy into action in your particular classroom. Underneath Translanguaging How-To is the ideas for implementation across the grade levels. And this is where the translanguaging strategy really comes alive because you see how it's been used in different classrooms and at different levels. So you'll see that the section is broken into the 3 grade level strands: elementary, middle, and secondary grades, and it includes examples of how real teachers have used this strategy in different kinds of classrooms. For each idea for implementation, we include the specific grade level and the program. So is it a bilingual classroom? Is it an ESL classroom? Is it a quote-unquote mainstream English classroom? All of those are important context for how you are going to implement the strategy, and will hopefully provide you with something close to your particular context so that you can successfully implement this strategy yourself. The sections of the sidebar, which on subsequent pages are running along the left-hand column in the sidebar, contain information that's relevant to the particular strategy. It may not necessarily be important, necessary, essential, but it might be of interest to you as you try out this strategy. For example, in this particular strategy, there is a troubleshooting section, right? A way of working through a particularly difficult aspect of a strategy. But there might also be a resources piece, right? Additional materials that you might need to use the strategy. And then lastly, we also have, wherever possible, included a section on emergent bilinguals, so modifications to the strategy for different subgroups of emergent bilinguals, such as long-term English learners, LTELs, or SIFE students, those students with interrupted formal education. Because those students need different things, these strategy pages are adapted in that sidebar for those students. So now that you sort of get a sense of what each piece of the guide look like, you might be wondering, how am I going to actually use this guide? So the very first thing you should do before you use the guide is you and members of your school community should decide what your needs are, the needs of teachers and the needs of the students, and which strategies might help you work toward meeting those needs. Once you have this conversation, you could start by, for example, reading the section on page 1 of the guide called Theorizing Translanguaging for Educators. This is a really important piece of the guide because it's a number of questions and answers written by Ofelia Garcia, and she really goes through and answers a lot of really great frequently asked questions. You might also go through the guide and select strategies that you could use to do a collaborative descriptive inquiry with a small group of your peers and colleagues. Page 7 of the guide gives you a nice overview of that process and can help you if you choose to go that route. Lastly, you could implement 1 or 2 strategies at a time and bring them back to your CDI or collaborative descriptive inquiry group to share what you've learned, troubleshoot, learn from one another as you implement these strategies.